Hey guys, welcome back to another educational video with Forever Hum. If you've seen our previous videos, we've already made two. One on our life of undergraduate degree at IISER Mohali and the other is how to get admissions into IISERs. Today, I'm specifically going to talk about how to get admissions into universities for a PhD degree within the United States of America. So today I'm going to talk to you about my PhD life at University of Southern California and how I got admitted into it. And hopefully you can use this information to your benefit when you're trying to apply to get admitted into an American university. So without further ado, let's dive right into the first topic, which is the admission process. Most of the American universities, if not all, base their admission procedure on these following criteria. The first one being the GRE examination. You have general GRE and you have subject GRE. Most of the American universities require a general GRE score. Subject GRE score is mostly applicable for high-ranking universities. At the time of my admission at USC, I was only required to submit a general GRE score. However, things have changed now. If you go and look at the site at USC Chemistry Department, you would realize that there's no more a GRE score requirement. Instead, you will have to provide them with the English proficiency test, which can be TOEFL or IELTS. Now, before we begin with other admission process criteria, it is important to note that most of the American universities admissions start at around August or September and end at around January the next year for fall admissions. So the first part of the application process requires you to submit a statement of purpose or SOP. Over the years, SOP has had various interpretations, but personally I will just give you what I had written in my SOP and perhaps you can use that information when you draft yours. The key things that you need to keep in mind while writing an SOP is that why are you applying for this university, right? You want to make them understand that your research interests and that of a professor at that university matches well. And the second thing that you want to make sure that the university understands is that you have the right ability and right knowledge to be able to accept that university. So you want to draft your letter in such a way that you convince them that you are the perfect and ideal candidate to be selected. And thirdly, you want to make sure that you have your career goals written down properly in SOP. Although this might not seem relevant to you at this stage, the admission committee at the university recommends you to have a strong career goal written down in your application. The next important document to be submitted along with the SOP is going to be your research interest. Now, this is the part where you show off your skills. Based on how much of research you've done in your master's thesis, you can write down a one-page summary of what kind of research interests you and what kind of professors at that universities are you willing to join for your PhD. A good procedure is to write down names of at least 3 professors at the university that you're applying to and make sure that your research interests align with theirs. Now, there is one thing you should keep in mind while writing your research interest or statement of purpose is to not use broad technical terms. Try to be as concise as possible in your research statement. So for example, I did infrared spectroscopy in IISER Mohali, but when I was drafting my research interest, I specifically made sure that you include sentences such as infrared spectroscopy of so-and-so molecule using so-and-so technique. This makes your research interest page looks even more professional and enticing to the professors that you're trying to apply for. A good practice is to go visit the professor's website at the university and read up as much as possible and formulate your research interest based on what you've gathered. The idea here is convincing the professor reading your proposal that you have a broader understanding of the field. Now, the other part of the admission process are the reference letters. Now, you can get the reference letters from your undergraduate university. One, you can get it from your main master's thesis guide. The other, you can get from professors with whom you've done some courses with at your undergraduate university. Or you can also get reference letters from places where you've done your summer projects. The last and the most obvious part of the application process is your transcript. So as you know, grades do play an important role in getting a PhD admission in American university. However, there is no set limit of what kind of GPA you should have, but it's generally recommended to have a GPA of about 7 and higher to get into a decent university. Now let's talk about admission scholarships. While these kind of scholarships are most common in European and UK universities, it is not so much in American universities. In US, the scholarship applications are different from your PhD admission process, and they need to be filed separately after you've joined the PhD program. The benefit of getting these scholarships is that you are offered a higher stipend, and as always, you can put down the scholarship in your resume for your future job application process. Just to clarify, these scholarships that I mentioned are a top up to the yearly stipend. Even without these scholarships, a PhD candidate in US earns a yearly stipend regardless of which university he or she lands in. Now let's talk about the PhD life in a US university. It may vary from university to university, but the first 1.5 years to 2 years is going to be mainly around doing coursework and teaching. Teaching is a very important part because that is where most of the Indian students or foreign students get their stipends from. Now there is no way around coursework, but you can use some of the credits from an undergraduate degree towards your PhD program. But it may be different from different institutions, so it's better to check with your university. Besides the coursework and the teaching, you also have the job of visiting different labs in that department and trying to find the potential professors that you want to work with throughout your PhD life. I know the first 2 years can be a little hectic, so be prepared for it, as it is only going to get even worse. No, I'm just kidding. It is going to get easier. So after you've done with your coursework and the teaching part and you've joined a professor, now you have to appear for the PhD candidacy exam. But before we move forward, I do want to specify one point, that you make no mistake in choosing your PhD advisor, because the one that you choose is going to stick around for the rest of your PhD life, which can be 5 years or it can be more, depending on how your professor is. So the ideal thing would be to going on rotation with different labs, and by rotation I mean visiting different labs and talking to the professors as openly as possible as to what your future prospects are going to look like. So in my case, I chose a professor who was aligning with my future goals and my research interests. It is a good habit to talk to your professor upfront as to what your future is going to look like after you finish your PhD. Meaning, if you would like to do a postdoc to become a professor eventually, or if you would like to join a private company or something else. And after talking to the professor, also have a word with the current PhD students in that lab so that you get their opinion on how that professor is in terms of research and also otherwise. It will be good if you can make some friends in the lab that you are planning to join, because you don't want an hostile environment. So jumping back to the candidacy exam, well, some universities call it candidacy, some call it screening, some call it something else, but in essence it's all the same thing. At USC, it's called a screening examination, where you do a 1-hour presentation on the research or the projects that you worked on in the past 2 years. Once you've successfully defended your screening examination, you are now entitled to give a qualification examination, after which you become a PhD candidate. A qualification examination is much like the screening examination, where you'll have to present a research proposal and try to defend that in front of the committee members. Now both screening and qualification examination are to be done in front of committee members, typically 3 to 4. At USC specifically, the qualification examination is done on a topic that is different from the research that you've already done in the last 2 years, but is relevant to your topic of research. For example, if your group does some kind of spectroscopy, you have to choose a topic which is completely different than this, for example like microscopy or something that is different from what you've already done. I know this can be a little hard, but most often than not, this requires you reading a few papers and few journals in order to come up with a proposal. But as soon as you're done with this part, you are a PhD candidate, and now there's no one that can prevent you from getting a PhD degree. So once you're a PhD candidate, you can work in the lab with your professor for a set number of years until you've defended your thesis. And this part of the PhD life is where it gets more exciting. You have multiple conferences and workshops that you can go and attend. Since tuition is free to PhD students, you are free to take any of the courses that are offered by your university. For example, at USC, in my 3rd and 4th year of PhD, I was taking up guitar lessons because I was very much interested in learning guitar, and also I took up a few lessons for squash and tennis. But even besides that, there's a plethora of things that you can do during your time at your university. And if you're a travel buff like me who likes to travel a lot, you can also go to conferences which are held nationally within America and also internationally, such as Europe or Australia. So the good thing about this is that all of this is paid by your professor's funding, so nothing goes out of your pocket. Unless of course, you're trying to go around the city visiting all by yourself. which is not a part of the conference or workshop, which by the way I do a lot. And alongside, you also have the opportunity to do collaborative research with different professors from other universities. For example, while I was working at USC, we had collaboration with some professors at UC Berkeley and Stanford because we had some experimental data that had to be collected at Stanford only. Through collaborative research, you open a path for future job opportunities. My recommendation would be that right after you become a PhD candidate, you try to think about your future goals. Try to meet as many professors, as many people, researchers as possible so that you keep in touch with them if and when needed. You want to set your name in the research community that you're already in, and you want to make sure the top professors in your field know your name either through research papers or through conferences. And the most important thing is that in your PhD, you don't lose hope. As soon as you start losing hope, you start going down the slippery path, which is not where you want to be. Just know that PhD is a time-taking process and you're doing your best to get the degree that you always wanted. So guys, that's it about my PhD life here at USC. I hope some of the PhD students can relate to my experience, and for the aspiring PhD students, I hope you got some information out of it. And if you missed Sonia already, don't worry. You will see her in one of the future videos where she will be talking to you about her PhD life experience in Australia, specifically at her PhD university. But before we part ways, don't forget to like this video, share this video with your friends and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.